The roar of the crowd echoed through Caesar's palace, the desert heat almost invisible under the glaring lights of WrestleMania. On the big screen, Yokozuna appeared, a 500-pound colossus whose every step seemed to shake the arena. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was a force of nature, a monster built to crush anyone who dared step in his path. Fans feared him, commentators marveled at him, and the wrestling world held its collective breath. But behind the spectacle, away from the cameras, Rodney Anawawai was far from the terrifying figure seen in the ring. Those who knew him offstage described a gentle, kind-hearted man, someone who could light up a locker room with his humor and easygoing personality. He was approachable, generous, and loyal, a man whose presence brought comfort to those around him. Yet even a gentle giant has boundaries, and the backstage world of professional wrestling had a way of testing them. By 1993, the landscape of professional wrestling was shifting. Hulk Hogan, once the company's centerpiece, was no longer the unstoppable hero fans had revered for nearly a decade. A new generation of talent was emerging. Names like Bret Hart and Yokozuna represented the future, wrestlers who could carry the company forward into a new era. Vince McMahon had plans to elevate Yokozuna to the main event scene, painting him as the ultimate monster villain, a character that could dominate storylines for years to come. But Hogan was not ready to relinquish his place in the spotlight. His presence loomed large, and his ego often interfered with the carefully laid plans of the company. The tension between the outgoing hero and the rising star was palpable, even before the lights hit for WrestleMania. The plan for WrestleMania 9 was simple, at least on paper. Bret Hart, the reigning WWF Champion, would defend his title against Yokozuna in Las Vegas. After months of careful build-up, the storylines had positioned Yoko as an unstoppable force. He would win the championship, solidifying his status as the company's top heel. The audience would be in awe as the new monster stood triumphant. The world's wrestling fans left to speculate how anyone could ever challenge him. Yet, backstage, tensions were simmering. Vince McMahon knew Hogan would not be content sitting on the sidelines. The clash of egos threatened to rewrite the ending before the first bell rang. When the match began, the crowd was electric. The hitman locked in the sharpshooter, a move as iconic as it was punishing. Yoko's manager, Mr. Fuji, threw salt into Bret Hart's eyes, blinding him momentarily, and Yoko executed his devastating pinfall. The arena erupted in a mix of shock and excitement. In that moment, everything seemed perfect. The rising star would finally achieve his long-anticipated victory, standing tall as the new face of fear in the company. But the universe had other plans. Hogan's music blared through the speakers, and the legendary hero stormed to the ring. The crowd, stunned, watched as he helped Bret to his feet and, almost effortlessly, accepted an impromptu challenge from Mr. Fuji on Yokozuna's behalf. Within moments, Hogan dropped the leg and pinned Yokozuna, stealing the spotlight and the championship. Backstage, the atmosphere was tense. Bret Hart had prepared all year for this moment, only to be blindsided by Hogan's interference. Rodney Anawawai, normally calm and easygoing, felt a deep sense of injustice. His chance to cement his legacy was stolen, not by failure in the ring, but by the machinations of ego and politics. The wrestling world can be brutal, but backstage power plays were a lesson Yoko would never forget. Jim Ross later described the situation as a political nightmare, one that created a divide between Hogan and the rest of the locker room. For Yoko, it was a first taste of how respect and talent could be overshadowed by status and favoritism. The sting of that WrestleMania would not fade quickly. Early in 1994, Rodney faced a moment that would define the rest of his career. A young wrestler, Daniel Dubiel, had reportedly disrespected Mr. Fuji, either through rudeness or, according to some accounts, an offensive remark about Fuji's heritage. Word reached Yokozuna, and for once, the gentle giant's patience snapped. What was intended as a routine squash match transformed into a brutal lesson. When Yoko delivered his signature bonsai drop, he did not protect Dubiel as he usually would. The move landed with full force, leaving Dubiel stunned in the ring. Observers understood immediately. It was no accident. Rodney's loyalty was unwavering, and his message was clear. Disrespecting his circle came at a cost. The wrestling world in the mid-1990s had become a political minefield. One faction, The Clique, led by Shawn Michaels, and featuring Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, and Triple H, wielded tremendous influence over Vince McMahon and the company's creative decisions. They were strategic, talented, and ruthless, often protecting their own while undermining others. In response, another group emerged, the Bone Street Crew. They were old-school wrestlers who believed in respect and loyalty, with the Yokozuna and The Undertaker at its core. Surrounding them were trusted friends like Rikishi, The Godfather, Savio Vega, Crush, and the Godwins, as well as Mr. Fuji and Paul Bearer. Together, they became a force the new generation could not ignore, ensuring that respect was earned and defended in the locker room. Even without physical confrontations, the Bone Street Crew established dominance through quiet confidence and a reputation for loyalty and strength. The Clique understood that Yokozuna's group could handle themselves if provoked. This mutual understanding kept the peace, creating a delicate balance of power backstage. Rodney's experience with Hogan's WrestleMania interference and the subsequent events cemented his approach to respect. It was not given, it was enforced. Every move, every reaction was calculated, forming a foundation for how Yoko would navigate the increasingly volatile environment of the WWF. By the end of 1995, Yokozuna's position in the company began to decline. His enormous size, once a symbol of fear and dominance, became a liability. Mobility decreased, and Vince McMahon started placing him lower on the card. Simultaneously, new talent, like Ahmed Johnson, emerged with explosive strength and potential. The push for fresh faces signaled a clear message. The business was moving on. Watching a rookie receive opportunities he had earned years earlier stirred frustration and bitterness in Rodney. The wrestling industry was unrelenting, and Yoko realized that no matter his size or talent, the spotlight could be stolen in an instant. The tension came to a head at Survivor Series. Vince McMahon's plan was to create a defining moment for Ahmed Johnson, having him body slam Yokozuna in front of a live audience, a symbolic passing of the torch. Yet, when Rodney was told of the plan, his reaction surprised everyone. He reportedly looked at Ahmed and said, "Well, I hope you can get me up because I'm not going to help you." In the ring, true to his word, Yokozuna remained uncooperative, forcing the rookie to struggle against his full weight. The move was completed, but the physical strain on Ahmed was significant. Yoko's stance was not about vengeance alone, it was about respect, earned through years of dedication, a lesson in the unforgiving hierarchy of professional wrestling. Even as politics and ego dictated at moments of glory, Rodney remained steadfast in his principles. He knew that respect, loyalty, and trust were the currencies that truly mattered, far more than titles or temporary applause. Yet, even as he fought to defend these values, time was catching up with him. His body, once a symbol of indestructibility, was beginning to falter under the immense physical demands of his size and the grueling schedule of professional wrestling. The story of Rodney Anawawai, the gentle giant turned enforcer of respect, was only just beginning, and the world of professional wrestling would soon test him in ways no one could anticipate. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but for Rodney Anawawai, it felt hollow. The world saw Yokozuna as an unstoppable monster, a 500-pound force of nature who could dominate anyone in his path. Yet behind the scenes, the gentle giant's mind was becoming a battlefield. Each day in the locker room brought a new reminder that wrestling was as much about politics as it was about power. Younger stars were rising, and the company's focus was shifting away from him. The weight of expectation, combined with the physical strain of carrying his enormous frame, began to take its toll. Every match was no longer just a test of skill, it was a test of survival. By 1996, Yoko's mobility had diminished dramatically. The very size that had made him legendary was now a serious liability. Vince McMahon, ever the businessman, was concerned about both Yoko's health and the company's bottom line. Matches that had once been breathtaking displays of power now became cautious affairs. Fellow wrestlers began refusing to work with him, fearing injury or catastrophe. Backstage whispers questioned whether he could continue at the level expected of a WWF main event star. Rodney, however, refused to surrender. Pride, loyalty, and the need to protect his friends kept him going. But deep down, he knew he was running out of time. The company's attempts to help him were both compassionate and humiliating. Vince arranged for Yoko to attend a weight loss clinic with fellow heavyweights, including Vader. The idea was to ease their workload and reduce health risks while preserving their careers. But the program failed spectacularly. Yoko and Vader were caught sneaking out late at night, indulging in fast food binges that only worsened their health. Publicly, Vince tried to spin the situation into a storyline. Vader broke Yoko's leg on television, a kayfabe injury designed to give him time off. Behind the scenes, it was a desperate attempt to buy time for a man whose body was finally rebelling against years of abuse. The humiliation didn't stop there. The New York State Athletic Commission refused to license Yoko to wrestle, citing health concerns. He failed his medical exams, rendering him legally unable to perform in one of the company's most critical markets. For Vince, this wasn't a matter of loyalty, it was a business liability. For Rodney, it felt like betrayal. The same company that had celebrated his immense size and relied on it to sell tickets was now treating it as a liability. The irony was bitter. Every pound that had made him special now marked the beginning of the end. Even as his career began to unravel, Rodney's reputation backstage remained intact. He had earned respect through loyalty, toughness, and a code of honor that few dared to challenge. Younger stars, like Ahmed Johnson, had been fast-tracked to the top, receiving pushes that Yoko had to watch from the sidelines. When Ahmed was instructed to body slam Yoko during a key match, a symbolic passing of the torch, Rodney refused to make it easy. He stood like a statue, forcing Ahmed to wrestle against a mountain of pure weight. The move was completed, but not without consequences. Ahmed later admitted he felt his back nearly snap under the strain. For Yoko, it was not just defiance, it was a lesson in respect and recognition. A reminder that talent and ego didn't automatically earn reverence. Backstage, the locker room politics were harsher than ever. The Clique, a group led by Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, and Triple H, had cemented their influence over Vince and the company's creative direction. If you weren't part of their circle, opportunities were limited and career trajectories could be sabotaged. Yokozuna, despite his fame and size, was becoming a victim of this invisible hierarchy. Meanwhile, the Bone Street crew remained vigilant, ensuring that no member of their circle was left vulnerable. It wasn't just about wrestling, it was about survival, loyalty, and maintaining a code of respect in a world increasingly ruled by politics and favoritism. As 1996 turned into 1997, Yoko's situation worsened. Reports surfaced that he weighed close to 660 pounds, making even simple movements a struggle. Wrestlers feared for their safety, and the audience noticed his declining agility. Every match became a balancing act between entertainment and risk. Fans, still enthralled by the persona, had no idea how fragile the man inside had become. Rodney's mental fortitude, honed through years of handling egos, politics, and physical danger, was being tested in ways the ring had never demanded. Every pinfall, every match result felt like both a performance and a negotiation with fate itself. Even Vince McMahon, who had once used Yoko's size as a cornerstone of his business strategy, reached a breaking point. He tried to ease Yoko's schedule, pairing him with faster, more agile wrestlers like Owen Hart in tag team matches, hoping the workload would ease the strain. But Yoko's body refused to cooperate. The gentle giant, once an awe-inspiring spectacle, now risked collapsing mid-match. Public perception remained, but backstage reality was grim. His health and career were on a collision course, and Vince had no choice but to act. The turning point came at a live, televised event that would haunt Yoko's legacy. On television, Vader broke Yoko's leg, signaling a storyline injury that required him to be carried out of the arena on a forklift. The moment was humiliating for a man who had once been feared and revered, a visual representation of how his career had deteriorated. Fans saw the spectacle, commentators offered sympathy, and behind the scenes, Vince weighed the risks of keeping him on the roster. It wasn't just about showmanship anymore. It was a matter of liability and life or death decisions for a man who had given everything to the company. Despite the setbacks, Rodney's resolve never wavered. He continued to enforce his code of respect, mentoring younger wrestlers when he could, and defending those in his circle. But time and physics were undefeated forces. By 1998, it was clear that the wrestling world was moving on without him. Vince, forced by circumstance and legalities, gave Rodney a stark ultimatum: lose weight or lose your career. For a man whose identity had been tied to size, power, and domination, the choice was bitterly ironic. What had once been the foundation of his greatness was now the reason he faced the end of his journey. Yokozuna's decline was not just physical. It was symbolic of the harsh realities of professional wrestling. Fame, respect, and power are fragile constructs, vulnerable to ego, politics, and the relentless march of time. Rodney Anawawai's story, from beloved gentle giant to a cautionary tale of pride and survival, was a stark reminder that the wrestling world is as cruel backstage as it is thrilling in the ring. The monster who had crushed opponents and captivated fans was now fighting battles far beyond any wrestler's imagination, against politics, health, and the inevitable passage of time. By the late 1990s, Yokozuna's world had changed completely. Once a towering figure who struck fear in every opponent, Rodney Anawawai was no longer untouchable. The gentle giant had become a man trapped by the very size that had made him famous. Every step was a struggle, every match a risk. The locker room politics that had once frustrated him were now paired with a harsher reality. His body was betraying him. Vince McMahon, forced to balance loyalty with liability, watched as the man who had once seemed unstoppable became a cautionary tale. But Rodney, stubborn and proud, refused to let his legacy be defined by his decline. He fought to maintain dignity, control, and respect, even as the world around him moved on. The WWF was eager to promote new stars. Ahmed Johnson, already a symbol of the next generation, continued to rise, and the roster was filled with younger, faster, and hungrier wrestlers. Yoko's role was reduced to sporadic appearances, matches that required careful planning to avoid physical catastrophe. Fans still marveled at his presence, but backstage, concerns were mounting. The fear wasn't about his skill, it was about survival. Wrestlers whispered about how easily a man of his size could collapse mid-match, about the strain on his heart and joints, and about the toll that years of wrestling and extreme weight had taken. Rodney knew that the end was inevitable, but he refused to surrender quietly. Even with limited opportunities, Yoko continued to command respect. Younger wrestlers learned quickly that this was a man who had endured everything wrestling could throw at him, and had emerged as both a feared competitor and a steadfast friend. Backstage, he became a mentor of sorts to the Bone Street crew, ensuring that respect, loyalty, and professionalism remained values that could withstand the turbulence of office politics. Yet, the harsh reality of his physical condition was impossible to ignore. Every match was a negotiation with gravity, with stamina, and with mortality itself. In 1996 and 1997, Yoko attempted to fight the inevitable. He tried dieting, training, and even attending weight loss clinics arranged by the company. Each attempt ended in frustration and failure. His size was his brand, his identity, and despite the risks, it was the only thing he knew. Vince McMahon, initially supportive, grew frustrated as the situation became a business liability. The public storylines, Vader breaking his leg, the forklift incident, and his dramatic television exits masked the fact that these were not just entertainment. They were desperate measures to protect a man who was physically vulnerable. The line between reality and kayfabe blurred, leaving fans unaware of how fragile their idol had become. The years that followed were a struggle against time and circumstance. Rodney's body deteriorated, and injuries became harder to recover from. His mobility decreased to the point where many matches required adjustments for safety. The once dominant monster was reduced to careful maneuvers, supported by tag partners, or sometimes absent altogether. Yet, even as the wrestling world slowly forgot him, those who knew him remembered the giant who had shaped an era. He had stood up to politics, defended his friends, and demanded respect in a world where few dared to. The wrestling industry, notorious for consuming its own heroes, watched as Yoko became a symbol of both greatness and tragedy. Rodney tried to stay active outside WWF, appearing on the independent circuit, but his body, ravaged by years of extreme weight, injuries, and constant travel, was no longer capable of sustaining the demands of professional wrestling. Each appearance was a reminder of what had been lost: strength, speed, and the ability to perform at the level fans expected. The gentle giant had become a cautionary tale, showing the harsh truth of what happens when physical limits are pushed beyond reason. Fame and legacy could not protect him from the realities of the human body. In the final years, Rodney's health continued to decline. Pulmonary issues, exacerbated by his enormous size, became increasingly serious. The man who had once crushed opponents in the ring now faced battles with every breath he took. In 2000, at just 34 years old, Rodney Anawawai passed away from pulmonary edema in a hotel room. The wrestling world mourned the loss of a man who had been larger than life in every sense, physically, emotionally, and morally. Yet his story lived on, a reminder of both the triumphs and dangers of professional wrestling.